spacecraft did not crash in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947.
You know flat earthers, I guarantee it. But you don't know who they are because they're afraid of talking about it.
This is not a test. This is your emergency broadcast system.
Hello and welcome to the 6th annual Subliminal Deception Podcast episode, your weekly conspiracy theory bullshit podcast. My name is Cody. I am joined by Phil. How are you?
Doing good, Cody. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right. It's been, you know what is kind of weird? That they have been threatening snow like the past 2 days, and it's been like 50 plus degrees, and it's been like warm enough. I've been running outside and shit, so I don't know if they're just still trying to scare everybody or what's going on, but it's kind of weird.
Could possibly be those, weather changing devices trying to get the road salt industry a little bit of a boost.
I loved when Obama was in presidency and like all the crazies would say that he's controlling the weather and he has some magical weather machine and all this. That was pretty funny. Do you remember all that?
Yeah, I remember a lot of different conspiracies that involved him. It's funny because a lot of those crazy conspiracies aren't following Trump, which...
Oh, they're still attacking Obama. I've seen plenty of them still attacking him, and he does not probably give two shits about what's going on in the White House right now.
Oh, yeah. If I was him, I'd be on a beach somewhere with a fucking Mai Tai.
Wasn't he a Coors Light guy?
Yeah, I know he was a Marlboro Light guy, and it was Coors Light, I think.
Yeah, I think he liked Coors. Anyway, so... the previous week, Phil, you joined my other podcast on Between the Bumbles, and how was that? Did you enjoy that?
Oh yeah, it was a great time. Yeah, I gotta thank Jordan for letting me come on there with him.
Nobody thanks that piece of shit, but no, we've gotten a lot of good feedback, and everyone said you did really good. So I think you're a natural podcaster, perhaps.
Well, thanks for the compliment. I'm just happy to help you guys keep that ball rolling forward. So,
you know what? It's fun to talk about the weirdest, most obscure horseshit conspiracies too. So, how excited? We're not going to spoil any Game of Thrones thing here, but how excited are you for the episode tonight?
Yeah, we are taping on Sunday. It's episode number 3 of the season. The battle against the ice zombies. So I'm pretty pumped. I'm going to order a pizza, make popcorn, going to make it a little party for myself.
Hell
little party of one.
Dude, it's going to be insane. So this previous Friday, I was hanging out with my friend Nick, and we went to the bar, had a few drinks and tacos or whatever. We came back and we were just hanging out here. Well, I was hitting my my vape pen, or my hash oil pen, right? And he wanted to rewatch last week's episode, so I was like, whatever. And I was watching it. Do you know the guy? Who's the guy who got grayscale? What's his name?
Oh, he is from Bear Island.
I couldn't think of his name.
Yeah, I can't think of his name.
Anyway,
he's Daenerys's advisor.
So, me and Nick were feeling pretty good, right? And he came on there. I kept laughing for like a half an hour straight about how that poor son of a bitch got grayscale and he's still stuck in the friend zone with Danny.
Oh, yeah.
If you think about it, he got friend zoned so fucking hard, he's just stuck in there.
Like, imagine, even after, like, some chick, like, basically thinks that you're left, like, leaves you for dead, never thinks she's gonna see you again, and then she sees you again, and it's like, oh, I'm pretty happy to see you, but I got John over here, so, yeah.
I got the ultimate sex beast, Jon Snow, over here, who is my nephew, I think, right?
Yeah, it's her nephew.
Well, we were talking about, like, me and Nick were really talking about, like, why, the second time watching that episode, I'm like, God, they are really trying to make her, like, a bad guy, almost, like Danny. Like, I feel like they're trying to make her a bad guy, kind of.
Yeah, it really feels like they're setting her up for a heel turn, and they're trying to get us sympathetic towards Sansa, I think, is what they're doing. They might be, because I think Sansa in the end will become a more important character. It's almost like they're using Daenerys as like a device.
It could be. Otherwise, they're gonna. It's like fake tension that's then gonna be broken or whatever. I was just thinking about this. Like, people are probably wondering why a conspiracy theory podcast is talking about Game of Thrones. Well, obviously, it's probably the best show ever made, but there's so many conspiracies about the show within the show. You know what I mean? So it's kind of fun to like try to guess what's going on.
Try to speculate on like, even though it's fiction, it's you kind of like. It does exist. Like, someone is creating this, so you do get to get a feeling like you're trying to be inside of his head. But
well, hopefully tonight, hopefully it's a badass episode and like blows everybody away. I have a feeling it will be.
yeah, I know they're going to clean up a pretty big... It's going to be when you clear out some of the old fictional characters, like the characters that you don't really need anymore, whose kind of their timeline thread is already up. I think there's going to be a lot of that.
Oh, that could be. I could very well see it. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say my buddy has a theory that Sam is actually going to be the one at the end, like writing the history. Because I was telling him I thought Samwell was going to die, but he thinks that he's going to live. So I don't know. We'll see.
I guess we'll find out tonight. And speaking of wars with humans versus White Walkers, I hear your conspiracy theory is along those same lines.
Well, not quite White Walkers, but yeah, I do have a conspiracy involving United States Navy and a foreign empire. So if you don't mind, we'll get started.
Okay, hold on now. So are you saying the foreign empire could not be relatable to the White Walkers?
Not unless it's Canada.
Good point. Yeah, I guess they would be the frozen north.
The frozen north, yeah. Of course, those White Walkers be pretty polite. I don't know. They would knock before coming in.
I'm sorry I killed you, buddy. I didn't mean to. That's an accident.
You gotta say it correct. Sorry. I'm sorry. Just kidding. I love Canadians.
Anyway, fire away, Phil.
All right. So on February 15th, 1898, the explosion of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor, Cuba, rocked the city of Havana and the fragile relationship between the United States and Spain. Spain was in the middle of a fierce rebellion with the colony of Cuba at the time.
Now, if you can fill myself and the audience in, what was Spain exactly after when they were battling Cuba?
Now, Cuba had been under the control of Spain for the past few hundred years. It was one of the last Spanish colonies in the North and South America and the Caribbean. They used to, of course, own much of South America and Central America, but they had lost all of that. And Spanish Empire in the Western Hemisphere was really like coming to an end. So they were just battling basically just to keep their last hold on Spain. Spain was just trying to hold on to Cuba at the time.
Well, I think everybody knows throughout history, eventually countries get tired of being overshadowed by their big brother countries or whatever.
So basically, really what the Maine represented was kind of like a linchpin in the end of relationships between the United States and Spain. The United States had sent the USS Maine to Havana Harbor just to keep an eye on things and protect interests that the American people had in Spain, and to protect any Americans who were in Havana.
Obviously our generation doesn't really remember when you couldn't travel to Cuba. Obviously you can now, but...
Well, I mean, you weren't really allowed to travel to Cuba up until a few years ago, I think.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying, do you know when they put the ban on going to Cuba?
Oh, it was during the Cold War, definitely, after
okay.
the Castro regime took over.
So now, I want to see if I heard correctly. The USS Maine was parked in a harbor next to Havana?
Yeah, in Havana's harbor. So it was right outside of Havana, right on the water.
That's like I don't know the geometry of Cuba that well, but I assume that's where most people live, is Havana.
Yeah, it was, it's their biggest city today, and it was their biggest city at the time. It was the capital.
They're still
of the colonial government in Spain.
I think they're still driving the same cars from back then too, right?
Yeah, pretty close. I mean, basically, you got to realize too, they are the best mechanics on earth because they will put any machine, like washing machine, dishwashing machine, part into these vehicles to keep them running. So,
and they're the best baseball players. One of them. Let's not forget that.
Oh yeah, really all you need is a bat and a ball. So you just.
Actually, I think
sport.
I feel like a lot of Cubans are pitchers, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, well, the pitcher usually is like if you think about like Little League, the pitchers are always the best player on the team. So I think that's why a lot of them get picked up.
That could be.
They're the ones who get noticed. So back to the Maine. So the Maine blowing up, the speculation that Spain was actually involved in the explosion kind of rocked the U.S. sense of what was going on. And really, newspapers, the American public, politicians really jumped on this and wanted to come after whoever was the guilty party. And it was believed to be Spain at the time.
So what would have the U.S. had against Spain at this moment?
Well, there were atrocities reported throughout the latter half of the 19th century involving the Cuban people. Spain and Cuba had been through 3 wars. This was actually the 3rd war of independence that Cuba was fighting against Spain. And there was a lot of atrocities that happened. So
okay,
that was one of the big things that pushed towards war.
Okay,
between the United States and Spain.
Okay, I gotcha. So do you want to go over maybe the reported explosion and stuff?
The destruction of the Maine resulted in the death of 266 sailors. The Maine actually was seen to be lifted out of the water, and then the front end of the ship exploded. Like the explosion completely disintegrated the front end of the ship. And this was a large steel ship.
Is it like what we know today as like is it a battle cruiser or is it like a...
Yeah, it was a battle cruiser. It was kind of one of the first American Ironside ships.
Okay.
These ships were actually coming out of the European shipyards well before the Maine did. The Maine and its sister ship, the battleship Texas, really showed like a jump in the U.S. commitment to the Navy after not having to fight any war since the Civil War.
Yeah. I guess technically they hadn't really had a use for a large navy then, you know what I mean?
No, they hadn't. I mean, except for blockading the South during the Civil War and kind of just having a navy just because they needed one, they really kind of let the Navy, money for the Navy, the technology, they really let it die down until the 1880s.
Okay. Now you said the ship, the way you described it, it blew up underneath of it, and then it kind of went in the air like the Titanic, I guess, if that's the best representation I can think of. Then the front of it, the front nose of it blew up again, right? Yeah,
basically the front end, it almost as if there was you think of like a boat on like a really, like when an ocean with like high waves, how it jumps up out of the water.
Yeah.
It almost did that, but Havana Harbor was completely still at the time. So imagine seeing a ship sitting still in the harbor, jumping out of the water and then blowing up.
Yeah, I don't think ships are meant to do that.
No, yeah, not usually. So basically, there were a lot of players in this conspiracy, supposedly, and there's also a lot of different conspiracies. So I'm going to just jump into who might be at fault in the blowing up of the Maine and the subsequent war between the United States and Spain.
Okay.
So these different kind of players in this were the rebel Cubans themselves, and they had been engaged in this current war with Spain. It was really an uprising, but it had been going on since 1895. There was also the Spanish Empire, which was reaching really the last of its hold on the Western Hemisphere and any sort of empire that they used to enjoy. They were at one time the richest empire on Earth and had the best navy, but that navy was old and but it was ancient compared to the rest of the navies in Europe.
You said they had like wooden ships and shit, right?
Yeah, they were still touting the old wooden ships that you would think of during the Revolutionary War.
Yeah, you gotta evolve a little bit.
Oh yeah, especially considering when you hear about the Spanish-American War, the battle that happened in Manila Harbor, it was horrible. I actually was watching a video on it this morning, kind of prepping for this. Basically, the admiral in the Spanish Navy, he had all of the ships go near the shore just so that when the ships got blown up, they would have a chance to swim to the beach. He knew it. The American ships literally just took aim and just knocked him out. It was like a turkey shoot.
Why? Okay, if that ship captain knew that, why didn't he just park the ships and be like, "Hey guys, just get off of the ships, just leave them here, or you're gonna fucking die anyway."
I mean, that would have been the better idea. He would have been better off if he would have just loaded the ships up with explosives and then sent them on their way, hoping that they hit something. Like,
that's true.
If you look at the battle, it was bad for Spain. It was really just for posterity that he fought it all.
Yeah, I suppose. Okay, so you've listed the Spanish, the Cubans, and who else are your possible culprits?
Lastly, the United States. And the United States kind of comes up twice, but because if you look at it, there's kind of two different interests for the United States. The United States have been eyeing the island of Cuba for about a century, and they really thought that it was part of manifest destiny that Cuba eventually come under the power of the United States, considering its proximity to Florida.
I feel like they still want it, like even to this day. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like they would love to have Cuba.
Yeah, even though we're in more of a global kind of like empire, like it's really, you can get attacked from all sides now, but back then, Cuba was kind of seen as a shield for America's soft underbelly, if you kind of look at how the island is situated.
Yeah. Okay, I gotcha. Okay, so why don't you start off with...
I'll start off with the United States.
Oh, you want to start with the UF? Okay, go ahead.
Yep. So the United States, like I just said, they had a lot of history eyeing the island of Cuba. When Spain allowed outside trade in 1818, basically the private agreements that Spain had with other countries were superseded by these new agreements that Cuba was allowed to make on its own. In 1820, President Thomas Jefferson said of Cuba that it was, and quote, the most interesting addition which could ever be made to our system of states. And he also suggested to John C. Calhoun, the Secretary of War at the time, that the United States, quote, ought at the first possible opportunity to take Cuba. So that was him to the Secretary of War, which is, of course, now it's Secretary of Defense.
I mean, those two statements sound awfully conspicuous, if you ask me. Now, I was thinking, maybe you're going to bring this up, but so obviously the USS Maine was, I had to imagine, how old was it at this point when it got blown up?
Well, it was only a few years old.
Okay.
So the problem was, by the time it was made, it was so obsolete. They had some problems with some steel and iron uprisings. There was some labor disputes that led to it taking longer than it should have. And the problem, too, is they kind of gotten beaten down by bureaucracy. It was when they decided to make the Maine and the Texas, one of those ships had to be made by American industry and American design. So instead of having both made by superior European design, one of them was made by American design, and that was the Maine. So it was already obsolete by the time it came around.
So basically, okay, they make this ship, probably, I assume, one of their first ships they ever made of that style. So if they did, in fact, self-sabotage the ship to, in fact, start the war with Spain, then they probably wouldn't be missing the USS Maine that much if they blew it up.
No, they wouldn't. They already had better ships coming out of the spigot by the time that the Maine got blown up. And they had the Texas, which was a much superior battleship already. So losing the Maine, obviously 266 sailors, is terrible. But I mean, if you look at this in the conspiracy, false flag kind of way, I mean, it's not that big of a deal to lose that small of a piece from the chessboard.
I mean, to a rational person, letting 200 and some people die is pretty fucked up.
But yeah, when you're looking at the geopolitical chessboard, it's not that bad. It's peanuts to these people.
You better state publicly here that you don't condone what the U.S. did or possibly did.
No, I don't condone any of that stuff. But I'm saying when you really look at how the figures are portrayed in these conspiracies, it wouldn't be a big deal to them.
Oh yeah.
Like when you look at how the conspiracies for the Illuminati, the Rothschilds, they don't even consider little people like us human beings anyway.
Oh, that's a good point. When you were talking about this, I was just envisioning, because you had that sweet ass Pontiac 6000 in high school.
Oh yeah.
Let's pretend the Pontiac 6000 is the USS Maine. You load it up with a bunch of high school friends and you blow it up just so you can get a brand new car out of the insurance settlement. Kind of similar to the USS Maine there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is similar in the fact that, that car was about 120 years old and it was made completely out of iron. So
that's true. That was a solid fucking car.
That thing was a beast, honestly.
Is that thing in the dump right now?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. That thing is a cube. It's at Quam's, just absolutely sitting in a pile right now.
I forgot about that place. God, that place was a dirty, dirty place.
Yeah, I remember when I used to race you in the Cavalier. Mm-hmm. My speedometer only went up to 85. I asked you how fast we were going. You were like, about 100. I was like, holy shit.
I know, we were fucking idiots back then. My God, holy shit.
16-year-olds are allowed to be idiots, though. It's okay.
That's true. All right, so
I was going to tell you the term. I use the term false flag, so I'll throw that in there right now. So anyone who doesn't know, the term false flag originally referred to pirate ships that flew flags of countries as a disguise to prevent their victims from fleeing or preparing for battle.
Uh-huh.
A false flag, as it's currently put, is thought to be a covert action to harm oneself and to blame the opponent, to kind of round up popular support for yourself.
I was going to say, I have a strange feeling that due to the current political climate in the United States, almost everybody knows what the word false flag is. I mean, not the ancient meaning, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, if you're listening to a conspiracy theory podcast, you probably know what false flag is. There's some popular ones. The Reichstag fire in Germany. There's 9/11, the Gulf of Tonkin Bay. There's just a ton of them out there. The Lusitania, Pearl Harbor.
I was going to say a lot of the extremist conspiracy theories even have those with school shootings and stuff like that. But that's a little too dark for my taste.
Those would be on a smaller scale. But yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, people think, I don't attribute those as false flags, but people do think that they are.
I'm saying that's obviously the conspiracy theory marketplace, I'll say, on the internet has a lot of kooky ones like that. So, and I hear that word being tossed around a lot.
Yeah, especially with the advent of the internet, it seems like anything can be considered a, false flag conspiracy nowadays.
Yeah, like Coke changing their flavor.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, so which one do you want to do next?
Oh, so I was just going to go end it with basically saying that the false flag conspiracy tends that a agent of the United States possibly placed, this goes into the explosion, possibly placed a bomb near the ship's fuel, which was right next to where 5 short tons of explosive charges for the ship's guns were held. And this would have been the perfect place to put it because at the time, most of the sailors were sleeping, so you would have gotten maximum death to occur from this explosion.
I mean, from how the descriptions of how it blew up, to me it really seems like somebody knew where exactly to put the shit to take it down, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the design of the ship wasn't that great, like I said before, but this was the best place for the ship to explode. Because you lost all the sailors, you lost almost none of the officers who slept towards the back of the ship. And the ship basically sank instantly. there was nothing left of the area to investigate really until later on.
Did I ask you, okay, so obviously we knew it blew up from essentially underneath of it, but the front explosion, was that just a byproduct explosion from the fire caused from the other one, you think? Because there's gunpowder there?
Yeah, I was going to say this a little later on, but
Oh.
the ship. They think that the ship actually jumping out of the water was the first explosion, but then the main explosion was a secondary explosion, which obliterated the entire front end.
But what I'm saying, do you think that the second explosion was one that was placed by somebody possibly, or was that just a byproduct of the first explosion?
No, I think that for this conspiracy, I think that the second explosion happened as a result of the first one.
Okay, yeah, that's kind
The
of what I
first
was
one was
thinking.
planted. Second
Okay.
one,
Because I was envisioning, okay, if it's blowing up and the ship's kind of going up, then the fire would probably travel up and ignite all that, you know what I mean?
yeah, that's the reason why the U.S. investigation thought that it was a mine was because of the upward movement. They thought that the mine exploded outside of the ship.
Okay. Do you want to go into how they believe the landmine would have gotten there to hit it?
Well, yeah, the sea mine. So this actually goes into Spain's.
Okay.
Spain actually put out their own investigation after the U.S. Navy's investigation to kind of discredit any view that it might have been the Spanish Empire that had the explosion. So their investigation found that 4 different points were important. So the first one was, had a mine been the cause of the explosion, a column of water would have been observed coming up from the bottom of the ship.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because that's where all the force would be coming from.
It's just like you see in the movies. When
Yeah.
you see a mine blowing up in front of a ship, you see this huge spout of water shooting up. It's kind of like the same thing.
I know just about it because I was watching First Blood, the original Rambo movie.
Yeah. Yep.
A lot of upward explosions in that movie. Anyway.
Yeah. So they also said that the wind and the waters were calm on that date, and a mine placed underneath the ship, wouldn't have been able to float into a mine. Basically, the mine would have been you would have had to use cables to set it off electronically.
Okay. Someone would have had to have planted underneath the ship, then ran the detonator to somewhere else on the island and then set it off, you mean?
Yeah, and no cables had been found running from underneath the ship or anywhere like that. So no one witnessed anything like that.
I was gonna say that would definitely leave a lot of evidence.
Yeah, especially you see a team of explosive experts. Someone on the ship would have seen it too. I mean,
That's a good point.
another thing was no dead fish were found in the harbor. And also, munition stores don't usually explode when a ship is sunk by a mine because it happens on the outside.
That is a good point because their main function is to puncture a hole in the ship that then fills it with water to sink it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, for this, the conspiracy, actually, the weird thing is, it's not really a conspiracy theory that's kind of out there because the U.S. actually used this to go to war against Spain. But the conspiracy that Spain mined or bombed the USS Maine is actually kind of ridiculous because, if anything, they would want the Maine to leave peacefully and kind of leave them alone. Why would you want to provoke the might of an up-and-coming power when you could just let them leave?
Yeah, that's the part that, I mean, that's what makes the most sense. But then again, we do know sometimes you get like a captain or a general or something who's a little gung-ho who wants to be the big dick to take out somebody else, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that is true. And I mean, I imagine, I didn't really think about this before, but some general who wants to return Spain to its prior glory might think that a big war would actually help their cause.
Or maybe his wife got chlamydia from a U.S. sailor. You never know.
That is true.
This is a revenge bombing.
There's quite a legacy of that in the Navy. So, I don't know.
Oh, did you see all that report that I just read it today? Okay, so Coachella just went on, right? And 11,000 people contracted herpes there.
Really? 11,000 people?
Ugh, disgusting.
Out of how many people went? 11,010?
I don't know. It's disgusting.
Ugh.
I was just
Yeah.
like 11,000. Holy shit.
Yeah, I had not heard that, but it sounds about right, I think.
Must have been a few sailors there, I guess.
Yeah, but well, anyway, so the conclusions that the Spanish investigation came to were not reported on by the American press. So as I said before, the American press really jumped on this. No more like newspaper editors than William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer, both very famous names today.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Everybody-
Hearst has his own column of conspiracy theories against him.
Does he really?
Yeah, well, he's one of the people who wanted to get rid of hemp, and he was a pretty big player trying to get like a lot of different like policies through. He used his newspapers for that.
I thought when they made marijuana legal the first time, it was because of a California senator or governor who was pushing that it was like super evil and shit, and then that's how he got elected and made it illegal at the same time. I thought that's what I heard, but I guess maybe that could be it, and this guy's pushing the agenda too through the newspaper.
Yeah, supposedly it's when the whole reefer madness thing kind of came around. They pushed a whole bunch of like false narratives, and really like the whole yellow journalism thing was like taken over at the time.
You know what? I can honestly say this: because it seems like I've been researching podcast stuff for right around this area, for this and Bumblebutt, and like if people don't think that sensational news existed back then, I think it might have been almost worse, because there was literally they couldn't call them out on their bullshit when they made up stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah, there was not a lot of fact checking. There was so many newspapers and just not enough like people to fact check them. It was anyone who wanted to start their own newspaper could. It was almost like us starting this podcast, just a little bit more expensive. It was not hard at the time.
See, we might not always get the facts right, but probably people are going to criticize us about it, and before they could just basically do whatever they wanted.
Yeah, I mean, and if they did, it's not like, I mean, everyone was lying. So it was kind of one of those deals where just everyone kind of was on board.
Now, do you think these newspapers, they just didn't want to see the Spanish investigations, or do you think they weren't allowed to?
I think that Spain was trying to get these out there at the time. So I imagine that they did see them. Spain was trying to get any eyes that they could on this. And Hearst had sent a team of reporters and artists to Havana to report on this. So I think guaranteed they did see this report. But I just don't think that they put it in their newspapers.
So either they didn't like the Spanish, or maybe the government was telling them to publish stuff like this?
I'm not exactly sure. I mean, what they did this for. In my mind, Hearst and Pulitzer were really just kind of competing for eyes on their newspaper, for subscriptions and for buy rates.
Yeah.
So
I always forget that's technically the ultimate goal of a newspaper.
Yeah, it's not the money. They don't care about Cuba. They don't care about Spain. It was probably mostly the money.
That's a good point. So, go ahead.
Also what I was going to say was for the belief that Spain may have done this, Pulitzer in his newspapers was telling everyone he thought that, or the editor or the journalist thought or was pinning the explosion on Spain. But privately, Pulitzer did not believe that Spain had anything to do with the sinking, and even was quoted as saying, "No one outside of a lunatic asylum actually did."
Well, I mean, I can kind of see like what you mean with him, where if he's just saying, hey, look, they weren't involved and all that, people don't want to read that. They want to read like, oh my God, it's the Spanish. Let's get these sons of bitches. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's just like today when they click on the big headlines. It's the same thing.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. It's just like, I mean, I think what I was like, why would these newspapers want to be so invested in starting a war? Maybe they didn't know it would lead to war, but I think you're right. They just wanted to sell newspapers.
Yeah, I mean, it's not much different than like the lead up. Do you remember the lead up to the Iraq? Do you remember all of the 24-hour news networks? It was constant bombardment. They would just take any piece of red meat they could and make a steak dinner out of it. It was bad. The same shit. you know?
That's a very good point. So
It's all about ad rev.
So, and you said you wanted to go over Cuba as well, right?
Yeah, so I was just getting to Cuba. So Cuba had been revolting against Spain for 3 years at the time. And I also mentioned previously that they had been in 2 other wars. One was the 10 Years' War from 1868 to 1878, and a second war, which was known as the Little War, 1879 to 1880. So that one was a little bit shorter and resolved quicker. But the Cubans had been involved basically in Spanish atrocities, and they were really trying to get rid of the Spanish Empire at the time.
So I take it the first 2 wars they lost then?
Yeah, they, well, I'm not sure exactly, like, I didn't go too much into these wars, but, I mean, any war that is called the 10 Years' War is going to sound pretty bloody. The Little War must have just been resolved quickly, though.
Well, I just assume that they must have won because they're still there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, possibly Cuba could have gained more autonomy after these wars, but they obviously did lose in the end because Spain still owned them. So, man,
for such a little island, they've had to endure a lot, haven't they?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Spanish or any colonial rule at the time was pretty bad. So, they were seen as like second-class humans, if they were even seen as humans at all.
So, okay, what reason could Cuba possibly have to want to blow up this ship?
Well, so the United States' involvement in Cuba would definitely speed up Spain's exit from Cuba. If Cuba had the United States on their side, they knew that it would only be a matter of time before Spain either lost completely or just ended up having to leave out of negotiations, like treaties. And it did turn out to be really quick. It was only a 3-month war.
See, I didn't think about that. That makes a lot of sense. If they blow up the ship, that'll force the Americans to think the Spanish did it, and then they'll start a war with them that will then help Cuba by proxy. So
yeah, I mean, and they didn't realize that the United States would own them for 3 years and not leave them alone until the communist takeover in the 1950s. They were probably hoping to be left to their own devices, but obviously that doesn't happen.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Yeah, it's basically an attrition to get the United States to leave you alone. So obviously, like I said before, the destruction of the Maine was really advantageous for the Cubans, and it directly led to the independence of Cuba. And Spain not only had to leave Cuba, they also left Puerto Rico and any other Western Hemisphere holdings. Then they have to leave Guam and the Philippines. So this really destroyed not only Spanish colonies in like the Western Hemisphere, but all Spanish colonies, pretty much.
So, I mean, if we're putting this whole thing in a nutshell real quick, if we're thinking about just to start this war, whoever did it, you have all the soldiers that died, and then I can only imagine how many people died during the war. So it's like, that's a lot of bloodshed just to basically over the ship exploding, right?
Yeah, I mean, for all 3 sides, really, like, it obviously happened. The worst was for Spain. Yeah. Spain got it the worst because they lost their empire. They lost all prestige. I mean, you gotta realize how bad of a fucking ass kicking this was for Spain. They got their pants pulled down and fucking spanked across their ass for this one. It was bad.
Well, I mean,
I would say, what's that?
Oh, I was gonna say, the Spanish don't sound like very nice people around this time.
No, they weren't, but you really couldn't be when every single one of your colonies was revolting against you. The Philippines were actively revolting against Spain too, and that was bloody and bad.
So, okay, now that we kind of gotten all the probable suspects, in who do you think probably caused the ship's explosion that then led to the war?
Well, this kind of leads me to my last conclusion. Okay. There was some investigations done in the 70s that actually showed some of those vulnerabilities that I mentioned before about how the ship was already obsolete and poorly designed. Like I said, the fuel for the ship was kept right next to all of the explosive charges for the guns, which is not a very good place to put them.
Generally
side
not.
by side. They actually think that there could have been a coal fire, which sparked like coal dust in the air to explode, which might have been the first explosion. And then that would have set off the explosive charges, which blew the front of the ship to bits. So really, I mean, in my mind, that is the best explanation for this. It was just a natural, poorly designed fuck up.
I gotta say, if that's true, that is like a hell of a coincidence that led to something very, pretty bad.
Oh, yeah. I mean, an obsolete ship going into a harbor of a war zone revolution and then happening to blow up, like with a bunch of witnesses around to see it. And yeah, it's a coincidence, but fuck ups do happen, you know?
I feel like this ship sounds like it was put together by the fucking Goof Troop or something.
Yeah, it wasn't the best. I mean, if the Maine had been designed as properly as the Texas had, I mean, who knows? It could have been, like, they could have made it earlier. It could have actually been somewhere else instead of going to Cuba. And if it did go to Cuba, it might not have blown up ever. And it wouldn't have started the Spanish-American War, which was actually one of the most important wars that America's ever fought.
It seems so weird, like, parking it in a main port when there's a war going on. Kind of strange, isn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't like it was blockading any ships from coming in or leaving. They just kind of posted up in Havana Harbor for 3 weeks.
It just
like, yeah, don't mind us, you know?
It's like parking in a handicap spot to run in and go get chewing gum quick. It's just like, it feels unnecessary. You know what I mean?
Do you want something bad to happen? Because, you know,
I'm just gonna.
you're just stuck.
It's like when you leave something breakable around kids. You'd be like, don't touch this because it's gonna break if you play with it. And of course, you know, they smash it immediately.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I don't know. I actually like, you know, what we've learned through history. Sometimes it's just a long string of bad coincidences that lead to something really fucking bad, like a war. But I don't know. I kind of like the defect theory, or I'm not always big on like the government's out to get everybody, but I don't know. I could kind of see them, if they really wanted something, blowing up their own ship just to start a war, you know what I mean? When they probably knew they could wipe them out pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really have much of a standing army at the time. So I didn't think anyone really thought that we could take them out in 3 months, but definitely they knew they could win. But I don't think they thought they could actually win that quickly and win that, like, much.
Well, what's the main thing they gained after the war?
An empire.
The U.S.?
The whole thing. They gained Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines, and shortly the island of Cuba. So we still own Guam and the island of Puerto Rico, obviously. We still have Guantanamo Bay, which is in Cuba. But this kind of jump-started America on the world scene. This, like I said before, this is the most important war the United States has ever fought. This turned us from a regional power into a world power.
That seems like a pretty good reward after the war. I mean, you know what I mean? So it kind of gives credence back to it could have been self-sabotage, but I think in the end, you're probably right. It was just a poorly made ship, and you have to learn you don't put two explosives next to each other. And you know what I mean?
Yeah, I like the whole, it was just a factory defect kind of design defect idea, but I also kind of like Cuba, because Cuba, they didn't come out the worst, they didn't come out the best, but I mean, they did eventually get their freedom after 3 years, and the rich people in Cuba had a pretty good run up until the communists took over.
That's a good point too, actually. I guess we'll probably never really know what happened, but obviously we know what happened after the ship blew up. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, they've had a lot of investigations. One thing I was also going to mention is they actually were able to put like a barrier around the ship and float it up to the surface so that they could get a better look at it. That happened in 1911, I believe. Yeah, 1911. There was another investigation into the sinking.
I would think they'd want to recover the people's bodies, right?
Yeah, they did. They recovered the bodies and buried them in American cemeteries. They also gave the ship a more dignified sinking out to sea rather than just sitting in a harbor.
Do they still do that?
For ships?
Like if they're going to decommission it, just like sink it in the middle of the ocean?
Actually, they do. They will sometimes blow up a ship or sink it purposefully to create like a coral reef for coral to build up around.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. I guess that makes sense.
Yeah. I've definitely seen like news articles about that, though.
I guess I never really thought of that. Well, we definitely know the Earth is in need of more coral reef.
Yeah. It's in need of humans to stop fucking it up. That's what it's in need of. Less of us. More tuna, less us.
Yeah, that's true. So, well, that was a great episode, Phil. I think the people who are more maybe either military fans or history fans will definitely have appreciated this episode. I definitely learned a lot. I obviously knew about the Spanish-American War, but I didn't really know. I would find it so interesting to find kind of like the launching points for wars sometimes, you know what I mean? It can be something that's so inconsequential that leads to like almost like a butterfly effect, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's kind of like if you think about it, like the lighting of a match. Yeah. But if you lit that, you use that match to light a fuse that set off like a whole string of fireworks, kind of like that. Just a tiny little thing, kind of like World War I.
Oh, yeah.
Same thing.
Oh, yeah.
Just one little, Franz Ferdinand gets capped and then the whole fucking world explodes. But I kind of wanted to get away from aliens. I was thinking about doing RAF Bentwaters, but we've done quite a bit about like reptilians and aliens and that sort of stuff.
I'll tell you
maybe
what.
Next week.
I'll tell you what. I don't think you have to worry because I think people love aliens.
Yeah, I just don't want it to be an every week thing. That's kind of... I was looking down the line of my future conspiracy and I was like, oh shit, I've got like alien, and then like something else, then alien again. So,
hey, I don't think our fans care because we've been knocking it out of the park. So anyway, if you would like to reach the show, how can we do that, Phil?
All right. So first there's our email. We would love to hear an email from you guys. Maybe talk about the USS Maine or anything you might think of caused it. The email is subliminaldpodcast@gmail.com. And we are also on Instagram at Subliminal Deception Podcast.
Right. And if you, like I said on the previous episode, if you want to talk to Phil directly, hit him up on Subliminal Deception Podcast on Instagram. If you'd like to talk to me directly, you just follow Bumabutt Podcast on Instagram. We'll talk with each other if anybody sends us any messages or whatnot. We've been getting a lot of good feedback about the show, so that's great. The final thing that we ask is if you guys could take a few minutes out of your day and just leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, preferably written. I think we have 5 now, which is amazing. So let's just keep them coming, and it keeps the show growing and helps us kind of reach a larger audience and all of that jazz. The whole point of having a podcast, essentially. So, but that's going to do it for me this week. Phil, is that going to do it for you?
Yep, that's going to do it for me.
All right, well, everybody, enjoy the 3rd episode of Game of Thrones, and we will see you next week.
Oh, it's going to be a banger. Thanks, guys.